when you think about executive presence, somebody who has to tell you that you don't have it, it's almost the equivalent of saying that you're not handsome or good looking, right? And so people find it very difficult to come by and tell you that you lack that. But in closed rooms, when decisions are being made about people, they'll say this person's a subject matter, but they don't have exec presence. Now, the fact of the matter is, the particular individual has never been told that.
Drove global finance operations for a 500K workforce. His past roles include senior leadership at Cisco, AOL, Symantec, and Deloitte. Recognized with multiple innovation and leadership awards, is a published author and playwright. His storytelling skills extend beyond finance, with his short stories adapted into theatre productions across Bangalore. So, let's all rise and welcome Sriram Iyer on the stage. A big round of applause, please.
Good afternoon, everyone, and the topic that we were going to cover today, which is executive presence and a seat at the table. Seat at the table is CXO, whatever you call it, the decision-making group. Now, executive presence, if you go on Google and look up, today there's an answer for everything. There'll be 5 C's, 7 C's, 3 C's, and all kinds of things. But I'm going to give you my own definition based on my own view of life and my practical experience over 35 years. I see Dr. Shikha sitting there, so I'm going to be spending more of my time talking on the fictional end of things because she can't challenge me. If I said something on the finance aspects of things, maybe she'll ask a question or two. So this is a domain in which nobody can challenge me, at least nobody in this room. So the important thing when you think about executive presence, and my definition is, how do you project yourself out to the organization, to your ecosystem, in a way in which you come across as being confident, credible, composed, with great communication skills. And I'm sure there are a bunch of other things that perhaps can be put within the domain of what I'm talking, but to me, these are critical things. At the outset, I'd like to mention that for a lot of people, what has got you here is not what is going to get you to the next level. And nobody really understands that. Unfortunately, you've been ticking all the boxes from day one, and you find that you've got the right technical skills, you've been a good problem solver, you've got great analytic skills, but there's something that seems to hold you back. And that comes under this kind of amorphous cloud, so to speak, of executive presence, right? So I'm going to try and separate it out into a couple of elements that are really the key things to think about when you think about your careers, and then I'll talk a little about what we can do to be able to get some help from within the company and from people outside to be able to address it. To start with, it requires a lot of honesty about oneself. And that's really difficult because we all think we possess all the skills that are needed. And when you think about executive presence, somebody who has to tell you that you don't have it, it's almost the equivalent of saying that you're not handsome or good looking, right? And so people find it very difficult to come by and tell you that you lack that. But in closed rooms, when decisions are being made about people, they'll say this person's a subject matter, but they don't have exec presence. Now, the fact of the matter is, the particular individual has never been told that. Let me step back a little and talk about a few things that we do as Indians, because it's deeply indoctrinated into our psyche, and that tends to impact our ability to be really successful. And I'm going to cover each of these things. So when we talk about communication skills, what I'm saying about communication skills is not speaking like Shashi Tharoor or writing like Shakespeare, but it's really about relevance in your skills, right? Whether it's writing or spoken. So when you take, for example, you have a set of slides. Every person in this room should be able to look at who your audience is and communicate. So if you're dealing with people who are below you, for example, you might need 25 slides to discuss an issue because there's a lot of information that they might need. There's a lot of detail that they might need. If it's colleagues, it's probably 15, 10. Somebody above you, it's 5. If it's a CEO, it's maybe 1 or 2 or 3. This is critical for people to understand because we tend to give presentations, exchange information in a way in which we always want to give others the impression of how much we know, as opposed to addressing what they ask for. And I would say that I've seen enough people at very senior levels also do that, because there's this obsession with being cerebral. There's this obsession with being able to prove that you know a lot. And I think it comes in the way. In fact, you'll see that most CEOs, C-level people, really don't have the time to understand too much. And frankly, at times they're not wired enough or well enough to be able to take into consideration all the things that you're seeing. So when we think about communication skills, it's about effectively communicating with people based on who your audience is, not a single way of approaching each person. I think if I had to look at some of the reasons why people don't make it, that's a big reason. Sometime back, I was called by a leading company where they said that below the CFO, there's a group of 6 to 7 execs, all of who are very good, but the board and the CEO thinks that none of them can make it. And these kind of challenges are there in every organization. And at some level, the issue is a problem at all levels. The person himself, the organization, HR, their managers, etc., for not developing them. But these things tend to happen because from one day to the next, you're doing everything that you have to do on your work. And the fact of the matter is that for most people, they think about themselves 99% of the time. And unless you're managing your manager very well, you're not going to get their inputs, right? So it's very important about communication.
Are you a mid-career leader who wants to earn 1 crore or who wants to become a CTO, a CIO, a CDO, a CISO, a CFO, a CRO, or any other C-suite or CXO role? The road to the CXO is something that I know and I can teach you. So don't delay, click on the link below.
The other thing that is important is influencing skills. I think people just don't realize the importance of doing it, especially today when every organization is going to be a matrixed organization. What does a matrix organization means? Your reporting chains are unclear. In fact, I used to tell people that, and I'm going to take the names of companies, what the hell? Whether it was Cisco or Accenture, where I was, out of 100 people, 99 people can say no, and only one person can say yes, and that's the CEO. Now, if I'm not being facetious, this is really all about how do you influence. And so in some sense, when you look at executive presence, it's really about how you come across to all your stakeholders. How do you come across to the people who report to you? Do they think that you'll watch their back? Do they think that they can trust you? Do they think that you will be able to, at some point in time when they're looking for promotion, help them? When you think about the people who are above you, it's about having the DNA of a company. Do you in some way represent that DNA? And here, let me just veer off a little and talk about some companies and their DNA, so I give you examples that can anecdotally for you represent what I'm trying to say. So if I think of a company like Qualcomm, for example, it's a high IP company. And why is it a high IP company? Vidurby, who was the CEO of Qualcomm, was a professor of information theory in San Diego and very well decorated, very well respected academician. So when he started the company, the idea of IP, the idea of complex work being done there became very important. And so that's the DNA of a company. So if you belong to Qualcomm and you were on the engineering side, certainly the expectation would be you needed to possess some skills that made sense there. I came from Cisco, which I would say is a marketing company. They sold the future, smart connected communities. The world of tomorrow where you're going to see that a doctor sitting in New York can operate on somebody sitting in a village in Karnataka through broadband and through telepresence, etc. Accenture, it was a company which was really an execution company because at its DNA, it had partners, right? And then from a partnership, it became this larger behemoth. And so if you're good at execution, you had a good role in Accenture, and every person out there prides themselves on it. So from your standpoint, when you think about each of your companies or where you belong, you just need to recognize that you need to understand what's most important for the company, and do you, in some way, represent that? So as a senior person in the company, you're an ambassador of the company, and you're, in some sense, representing the brand. Do you do that? So these are very, very important questions that each one needs to ask himself or herself, because when you find that you're being passed over, you have to realize that there is a reason for it. And the fact of the matter is, not everybody who's above you and you evaluate them by some of these metrics is going to look like they possess all the things that I was just talking about. And that's true in life. Human beings make decisions about human beings. Sometimes they make bad decisions. Sometimes there are people who are tremendously politically attuned. So understanding the politics of an organization is not a pejorative term. So I think I'd encourage every person to understand the politics of the organization. If you join a new one, you just need to understand, how is it that it ticks? You're not going to go there and immediately set the place on fire with all your efficiency and productivity and ideas, but spend some time, invest some time in trying to understand who makes the decisions, what happens, and how do things work there. This might sound like a bunch of mumbo jumbo, but they're very critical to your success in an organization, because without understanding the politics of the organization, you're not going to get very far. When I was younger, I used to think that I understood politics, but I was above being political. That is bullshit. I didn't understand it well enough. I understood it well enough to be able to retain my job, but perhaps there were roles that I could have hoped for that didn't quite happen because I didn't, in some way, submit to the right kind of exec presence that the organization required. A very important thing is composure, right? How do you handle stress? How do you manage to be in a situation where all people around you can gain some confidence about how easily you're taking it? That doesn't mean that there aren't leaders who freak out at every small incident, but the ones who are really successful are the ones who can absorb the stress. Hopefully it doesn't impact their health, and be able to give you a sense of calmness that at some level makes you feel that whatever happens, this person can take care of this. So in a broad sense, executive presence is about being able to, for yourself, recognize the level of authenticity that you need to bring, and for the organization to be able to project that so that people could look at you as a leader and a person who can be trusted. My own views on leaders, Dr. Shikha notwithstanding, are cynical. I've had my pluses and minuses, but are there good people? There are. They aren't as many as they should be. And that's why I write about organizations. All my plays, I've got 7 plays, 5 of them have been staged on about 50 occasions in Bangalore. And I'll continue doing that because this is my way of trying to make sure that organizations and leaders are more accountable to the people that are there. And again, I'm just stepping a little aside. Now, what can you do? We spoke about Executive presence, we spoke about what it kind of entails. Now, what can you do to find out whether the leadership out there thinks that you possess executive presence? So if you go to HR and say, do I have executive presence? You're going to get a lot of BS, right? Because frankly, it's not fair to ask them that question. If you don't have the kind of relationship with them that can give them the comfort to talk to you about it, they're not going to do it. Right? So it's not just once you go into the room, shut the door and do it, but it's about how you ask the same question in a different way. So if you were to go and, for example, ask them, when you look at this leadership group, who do you think embodies all the core values that the company professes, and what are the things that stand out? Those are the places where you'll get sound bites that can be really useful and can really help you understand how HR is looking at it. Now, that's one place where you go to find that out, right? I don't know anybody who didn't have executive presence who is being told to his or her face that you don't have it. It's an extremely difficult thing to do. So it's important that you make the effort to try and figure out what you lack. And so one I said was using HR as a way or as a vehicle to get to their responding on this one. Another source that I think could be really useful is your own performance evaluation with your boss, right? Rather than focus on the bonus and how you have done, all those are important. You should start focusing on how does the person see you at the next level. And even if they say, you're not ready, it's 3 years from now, 2 years from now, ask them a few more questions. I mean, when you look at your peer group or when you look at somebody you're looking to promote, what would be 2 or 3 traits that you think are critical to a person making it? Now, this starts giving you cues about how this person is looking at you and whether you're going to be able to make it. Again, do not assume that there is any age where it is beneath you to ask these questions. These are things that have to be asked for as long as you're working, right? You've just got to figure out the way to do it. In fact, whenever I thought that I'd done something good and didn't happen too often, I made it a point to go to my manager and when he says good job, I'd immediately throw in something there which said, I hope you're finding that I'm that I'm meeting all your requirements and I'm set up for my next level or so. Another thing that you should do, or I found very useful, for example, in Accenture for managing directors, there is this thing called self-reflections. Do it. If you don't take yourself importantly, nobody is going to. In fact, I remember when I was in Symantec, we had this gentleman who used to work with us, and all of us would wear a blazer and try to dress down to the extent possible. He would come in a 3-piece suit or almost like a tux, and we'd laugh at him. We'd laugh at him because he looked ridiculous, but he was the only guy who got promoted, and he became our boss. And this is not fiction, this really happened, because he said, if you don't take yourself seriously, who will? So his mantra was, when you're a director, dress like a VP. When you're a VP, dress like a CEO, whatever. I mean, depending on what kind of progressive path there is in your organization. For me, these were instances that, while it was difficult because the same person I was laughing at became my boss, it also taught me about how other people in the organization see somebody. Don't make enemies in the organization. That's extremely important, because whatever executive presence, etc. you do, particularly if at the C level you take on some people, you're going to have problems. And that's where there's this whole thing about emotional maturity that comes in. And I'll give you an instance of when, not too long time ago, I was dealing with one of the senior most finance people in an organization, the name I won't take. There's a gentleman who knows which organization it is. And while we were chatting, he was my skip level. I had my boss and his boss. And when he saw my analysis, he said, "You're being very cute here." So I immediately said, what is that supposed to mean? So when you say cute, it means it's an analysis that's disingenuous, right? So my boss, who normally would not, confront his boss, said, yeah, like Sriram, even I just wanted to understand why you're using the word cute. So the skip level went into um, a massive kind of verbal piece where he said, I'm in trouble because of you, blah, 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 blah. And it went on for about 5 minutes. And then my boss said, look, it looks like you're at one spot and Sriram and I are another. Why don't we solve for our company? Now, I thought that was a brilliant way of bringing the whole issue back to what ultimately is going to be the way in which we could go forward. So ego can get in the way, we all can be emotional. Let's try and stay away from it.
Hi, I'm Mudit Saxena. I'm a Global CXO leadership coach. I'm globally awarded. I'm a TEDx speaker. But you know what's most important? My students have become CEOs, CXOs. My students have got 100% increase in their salary. Some of them earn more than 1 crore. Some of them didn't have jobs and they found new jobs. I've been a CXO. I worked in 5 countries over the last 30 years. And I've impacted 10,000 lives across the world. My students have come from the US, Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Asia. The road to the CXO is something that I know and I can teach you. So I look forward to working with you, and if you're interested, just book a call with me in the link below.
So try to find out from the people around you, find a mentor, find somebody who can be honest with you. Always remember that giving feedback is a lot tougher than accepting feedback. Once you get the feedback, you know what to do with it, but that person has exposed himself or herself. So if somebody is willing to give you that feedback, that's great. When I moved back from Symantec to India, and we had a lot of SEC problems, etc., I had gone, and there was a new CFO, and he met me, and he asked me, what are you doing about your new role? And I said, I'm looking for other roles. The work in Asia Pac is not really working out, so I'm looking for different roles within the company. He said, if I were you, I'd look outside the company. And I said, I didn't ask him any questions. He had done me a big favor. He had told me, he said, you've been thrown under the bus. Now, these things happen in everybody's life. I'd left the US, I'd come back to India, and we had had SEC problems, and I was dealing with revenue. So who to catch or who to blame? Now, I could have sat out there and cried and screamed and shouted, or I could have thanked him and walked out of the room and tried to get out of that place. And I did that in about 2-3 months. So sometimes getting these kinds of feedback is also a sign of respect for you. So, just in the interest of time and trying to get some things around this to kind of close it, I'd say that this is perhaps the one thing that stands between you and your success to the next level. Take it very seriously, because that's the one thing which doesn't have any form, but becomes the most important reason why you become part of the brand of that company. Spend the time to think about yourself, reflect on yourself, and have conversations. Don't have the conversations when you're up for promotion, but make it a periodic thing around what could you do differently, et cetera, and this will really help out. And then, kind of to conclude, and maybe you'll think that this is being said because I'm no longer really in the corporate workspace. I have my CA firm that I have in Mumbai, where a lady that I did my articleship with, we both have got together, and fortuitously, it's called Agarwal Iyer, AI, right? So, there's nothing like AI. It's a small firm where we do some tax work, and then I do some consulting for people who are looking for valuations, etc. I think the most important thing for every person out here is their health. And sometimes when things don't work out well, it impacts people's health. So keep things in perspective. From the world of theater, life is a play, and so is work. And to some extent, you have to be able to look at your life and what happens and what doesn't with a little bit of detachment. For a lot of you, because I'm here after working, it'll seem less significant. Someday you'll reach my age, and you'll probably give the same advice to somebody else who's sitting out there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sriram Iyer, for that powerful closing speech. We'll do a quick Q&A session of just about 5 minutes.
Good evening, sir. I'm Saurabh Suri. You said don't make enemies in the organization. While the intent is not to do that, but sometimes it happens that maybe directly or through someone, the undercurrents and the politics, you tend to have enemies. How to bridge that gap and how to handle that situation?
That's a tough one, and I'm going to veer off course and ask Dr. Shikha also if she has an opinion. I'll give you mine. Um, you know, if you, depending on the size of the enemy, it could probably be like a bad marriage, right? I don't think at that point in time there might be too much you can do in terms of staying there, regardless of the rhetoric, regardless of the BS the other person gives you. They get a chance to essentially decide your future, and then you should probably start looking around. But mine is a cynical response. The person who's all upbeat and motivational can probably give an opinion which might be much more to your liking than mine. Go ahead.
Hello, Saurabh. What he's saying simply
Yes,
is,
yes. No, I
if the person is more senior than you and has more weight in the organization and can generally affect your life, I would say, just to add to that, try and see if you can bridge the gap. And if it's so significant, right? If it's the CEO and you're the one there,
What's he saying?
it's always good to balance.
I would still be working.
Okay.
thank you.
Yes, Suraj.
Touched upon that feedback is something, and I've read some Harvard quotes also that if somebody is not given a feedback, he's deprived of a very big incentive, right? So you mentioned about that in feedback, you instead of focusing on performance and outcomes, you focus on feedback. That is very important. So I just wanted to ask for, how do we navigate if somebody has decided, because some organization have some percentage where, if you are not the chosen one, you get some percentage back to you, irrespective of what you perform.
Right.
Right. So then you rightly mentioned that your growth is not decided by you, it's decided by the upper management, right? But your career and your leadership is decided by you. Right. So can you elaborate a little more how to navigate such situation?
So, I have a simple answer for it, and it may not be the most optimal answer, but it's my answer. I just think it requires a level of honesty and your ability to look around you in your ecosystem to see if you're really being valued, right? And if it doesn't work out, life is too short, you should leave and do something else. I mean, it's like in a stock market, they say it's not important to know when to buy, it's important to know when to sell. We all have a sell by date, and we need to understand that none of us is indispensable. Think about it this way, and I tend to get lyrical and poetic and visual because of my theatrical experiences. When you join an organization, there's a gun which has a bullet with your name on it. The bullet gets fired and it keeps searching for you. And you can duck, weave, and move around. But one day, one of two or three things will happen. You'll either open the door and leave yourself, or it'll hit you, or somebody will knife you in the back.